subscribe to the Law Stash YouTube page. That's LAWSTACHE.
Hey, Law Stash here. I'm an attorney in the Southern District of California here in San Diego. If you're a returning viewer, you might be a little bit shocked to see a video being published on a Friday. Typically, I publish my videos every Wednesday. We take one case, we discuss it in detail, and of course we focus on the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth Amendments. Hopefully you remember your amendments, and if you don't, take a look at the Constitution one more time. You'll find out that these amendments are very short, they're vague, of course they're written a few centuries ago, and now we have to rely on the courts to interpret the laws and tell us whether any particular law fits within the United States Constitution. Every Friday, I will recap some of the cases that I saw throughout the week, some things I saw in the news, and maybe even focus on my own cases. The idea of these recap videos is going to be not to go through the cases in detail. Instead, I will just give you a sort of an overview and then encourage you to do your own research, take a look at these cases, and at some point I might develop these cases into full-blown videos. But for now, let's start off with the Second Amendment. If you live in the United States, or if you're familiar with our laws, the Second Amendment protects your gun rights. Of course, in the United States, we have those. Now, if you look at some of the history of these laws in the United States as they go through the guns, you will find out that whenever somebody would challenge any particular gun law, it would go to the court, and the courts would then use sort of a balancing test to see whether that particular law would be constitutional. Now, in 2022, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, a Supreme Court case, decided a new test. The Supreme Court told us that whenever we look at any gun law, we have to see whether it comports with our nation's historical traditions on gun regulation. Since that decision, a number of districts saw a lot of challenges to different type of laws. Of course, the Bruen decision dealt with concealed carry permits. But because the case law developed this new test, people have challenged other parts of laws throughout the states here in the United States. Some of the challenges came to Section 18 U.S.C. 922 G1. This is the section that prohibits an individual who have previously been convicted of a felony on any crime punishable by more than 1 year from possessing firearms. This is commonly known as felon-in-possession. And now this week, for the first time, the Ninth Circuit holds that felon-in-possession is unconstitutional as to non-violent offenders after the Bruen decision. May 9th, 2024, in the United States versus Duarte, a split panel of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit held that under New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, 922 G1 violates the Second Amendment as applied to Duarte, a non-violent offender who has served his time in prison and re-entered society. So take a look at this law, take a look at this case law. It is important, it is a big development. Of course, for now, until this decision, many circuits have held that Bruen and the Second Amendment only protects law-abiding citizens. And so a lot of districts said that 922 G1 is still constitutional because it deals with felons. So for the first time, the Ninth Circuit now says that 922 G1 is unconstitutional even though this individual is a felon. He can still have his guns. So take a look at this case. Let me know what you think. Let's move on to the second topic. The second topic deals with the First Amendment. The federal judge in Washington, D.C. sentenced an anti-abortion activist to 5 years in prison for illegally blockading a reproductive health clinic. Lauren Handy is the first person to be sentenced for violating Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. So the interesting part here, of course, is you have a right to protest in the United States. This is your First Amendment right, of course. But of course, another thing that you cannot do is create violence. That is not protected under the First Amendment. So the judge in this case said that Americans have been protesting in favor of and against abortion access for better part of a century, and there may be nothing more American than these protests over conflicting views of fundamental rights, said United States District Judge Collar Cotterly. She also said that, but the law does not protect violence or obstructive conduct, nor should it. That's what you're being punished for, not your views on abortion, nor your very American commitment to peaceful protest. So, interestingly here is that for the first time, we're seeing this statute being used. And take a look. I will link some of the stories below in the description here in this video. Take a look at this case and see how it develops. A couple other things we saw. We saw in the Southern District of New York, authorities charged two brothers for allegedly stealing $25 million worth of cryptocurrency in under 12 seconds. These two individuals are brothers. They both graduated from MIT, so very smart individuals. They're charged with wire fraud in the Southern District of New York. The reason why I brought this case to you, one, we'll have to take time to see how it develops. But the interesting part is that whenever we have these tech decisions, always remember that as technology becomes better and better, as there are these developments, the law is much slower to catch up and prosecute some of these individuals who commit crimes using new technologies. Here, the U.S. attorney said that the two individuals, the two brothers, engineered a first-of-its-kind wire fraud scheme to gain access to pending crypto transactions. So, as the technology develops, so has to the law. And sometimes it lags behind. So those are the three big topics that I want you to go on. Take a look at the description. I will give you some of the links for you to research a little bit more. But this is just an overview, a quick recap on a Friday. And let's finish off with my own cases. This week, I had two sentencings. One was a 1326, which is an illegal entry charge here in federal court in the Southern District of California, right across the street. One thing that I will highlight is that whenever you're in federal court, and most of the time in state court as well, but if you plead guilty or if you go to trial and lose and will be sentenced at some point, prior to sentencing, a judge will order what's called a pre-sentence report, sometimes called a probation report. Here in our district, we call them PSRs, pre-sentence report. Now, the reason why the court orders it for the probation to be complete is that it gives the judge a better overview about my client. During the interview, the probation officer will go into detail about my client's life, background, family situations, employment, medical history, and so on. It gives a better overview to the court. Now, of course, it takes time for these reports to be completed. We have to find the time to meet with the probation officer. If my client is in custody, then we have to go into the jail to interview the individual. And of course, with a big volume of cases, it just takes time. Usually 2-3 months for the probation department to complete these reports. If you are facing a time-served sentence, potentially, of course, my biggest interest is to get my client out of custody as soon as possible. So in this situation, the individual was potentially looking at a time-served sentence. So the quicker I can bring my client before the judge for sentencing, the better will be the outcome. And so I asked the judge to have my client waive PSR, give up his right to have the PSR completed, and instead go with what's called a rap sheet. Alternatively to PSR, an individual can be sentenced with a criminal history report, which is usually takes up to about a month for the probation department to complete. Or you can go into sentencing with only a rap sheet, which is completed by the prosecution. So if there's no arguments, no disagreement as to the criminal history, then in order to speed up the process, I asked the judge in this case to go through sentencing only with rap sheet. Of course, then a lot of work comes to me because I have to write a very good memo. I still have to explain to the judge who my client is, what were the reasons for committing this particular crime, and so on. At the end of the day, the way it resolved is that the judge agreed with me to go have my client plead guilty this week and be immediately sentenced the same day. He received time served sentence. So the judge agreed with me, not with the prosecution, and essentially same day my client was released. The second sentencing I had this week is carjacking, which is Penal Code Section 215 here in California. The only reason I mentioned this case is that unfortunately my client had some mental health issues. The legislature has encouraged the judiciary that individuals can ask for diversion in our state, individuals who are suffering from certain mental health conditions. This is the case where it is often up to the lawyer to hire good experts. In this situation, we hired a psychiatrist. In fact, one psychiatrist. Then after the report was completed, we were suggested to hire a neuropsychologist to go more into detail. And so at the end, the only reason I mentioned this case is that the judge applauded me and my partner and said that we did a good job, which is always nice to hear from a judge who said that it was good that we asked for all of these reports because they were very helpful for the judge at sentencing. So this recaps May, today is May 17th. It recaps this last week on all the things I saw in the news, as well as my own cases. I hope this is a little bit different, but I hope you still like this video. Click like, hit that subscribe button, share my channel with your friends and family. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star review rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to loststash.com and check out some of my merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts that have the Do Not Arrest This Person written here on the front and huge letters in the back. Thanks a lot for watching.